Everyone, my name's Neil Harrington. I'm the VP of Sales and Alliances at Moxie. We're an automated testing and monitoring platform for your marketing and sales tech stacks. We work with fast-growing companies to ensure they have quality throughout their marketing and tech stacks. I'm joined with Dawit Tesfaye. He's the Director of Marketing Technology at AvePoint. AvePoint's one of Microsoft's largest partners, and I feel like every year they win Partner of the Year at Microsoft. But they have solutions across the spectrum to help you migrate, manage, and understand your Office 365 instance. They're a phenomenal organization. And I'm excited to have Dawit here today because as we've been working together, watching him sort of grow his organization and understand how he thinks about technology and integrations and ensuring everything's working as expected has been really eye-opening to me. I think he's one of the premier thought leaders on sort of how to do that and has this great eye of where the future's going with that. Also, more importantly, on like how to make sure analytics are finishing at the end of the quarter and making sure that they're all correct. So with that, I will turn it over to Dawit. Take it away.
Thank you, Neil. I truly appreciate that. That introduction is going to be hard to follow through on that one, but so I'm going to share my screen real quick so that you all go ahead and follow through. Awesome. So before we go through the agenda, I think like one of the key things that I want to do real quick is just go over what I've been going through the past couple of days, right? So over the past 2 days, for those that don't know, the MarTech conference has been going on, and I've been sitting on as many sessions as I can, and it's been great so far, and I've been learning a lot, and you know, it's just been a wonderful experience. But not to knock on the conference, but one thing I have noticed is that I've heard a lot of people just talk about data in general, right? But a lot of them focus on bad data and how detrimental that is to achieving your goals. While I agree with them, and you know, I think all the points that they've made have been very valid and just been really key. The one thing I don't really hear from them is that they don't really go over identifying the root causes of that bad data, right? And the different tools and technologies out there that can help automate and scale identifying those root issues. And so, you know, one of the things that I hope, at least from this presentation, is that you guys can get a sense of what we're doing at AvePoint in regards to how we're identifying a lot of the root causes of our bad data and how we're using Moxie as our tool of choice for the automation of our entire QA platform on that. And real quick, one of the things I noticed from the keynote at the end of the sessions yesterday was that Scott Brinker, for those of you who don't know, is the person that is essentially behind MarTech. But he said the big thing about Big Ops is that it's not just the data that's growing, it's the interactions that every single one of us as an individual is having per day with data. He continues to go on and say that's actually growing even faster than the data in the world. The reason that stood out to me, and one of the key reasons that I wanted to read that out to you guys was, again, you see that big focus on data. And you'll see that throughout this presentation, but I want to take a different twist to it and focus more on the quality aspect of that data, right? Not just why it's bad for your entire tech stack, as you know, in order to achieve your goals and whatnot, but also what you can do to identify where that bad data is coming from and actually just, you know, plug all those leaks and holes and whatnot. So that being said, you know, and what we're going to be going over today is essentially why QA is critical for your MarTech stack. How we at AvePoint solved a lot of our LinkedIn marketing attribution gaps. How we resolved a few GDPR errors that, you know, helped us get more opt-in contacts. And then, you know, one key focus for me, and I've been hearing it a little bit in some of the sessions that have been going on in MarTech conference, is that the focus on people, right? Whether there is external or internal. Right now, I'm going to be talking a lot about the internal aspect, and you'll see a little bit more in my presentation on the external aspect of that. But internally, is, you know, creating career advancement opportunities. Essentially, you know, people here automate and they assume job losses or things of that nature, right? The robot's going to take my job, or you've automated all my tasks, but that's not necessarily the case. The case here is that I want to be able to automate as much of the redundant tasks that people do in order to free up their time so that they can actually spend more of it doing some insightful analysis, being proactive, looking into what I call innovation, right? And that's one of the pillars of the MarTech department that we're building out at AvePoint. So that being said, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So Neil did a very good job of introducing AvePoint and giving you guys, like a big overview of what we do. We are Microsoft's largest Microsoft 365 data management solutions provider. We offer a full suite of SaaS solutions to migrate, manage, and protect that M365 data and other data points as well. We do have over 8 million cloud users, and a big focus of ours is digital transformation, governance, and compliance. So with all of that said, why does that matter? Other than a shameless plug for AvePoint, but why does that matter, right? I believe this sets the context of what we will be discussing throughout our conversation today. We at AvePoint are in the B2B marketing space, right? And as such, we typically fall in that mindset of we're selling to other organizations, and we tend to call those accounts. That's not new for anyone that's been part of a major sales organization. The reality in this space is there tends to be more than just one buyer in a long drawn out purchasing cycle. Each account or organization could have multiple people within the buying process, and all of those people play a different role and serve a different purpose and perform different actions, whether that be on your website, your app, or any other platform that your customers are using. And they're all going through a very different evaluation process. A CIO might be going through their own set of evaluation checklists that they need to check off, which will be completely different from an IT manager who's in the weeds and has a completely different checklist. So that being said, we need to capture each and every one of their data points accurately. And in order to provide them with what they need and target them efficiently, that data has to be accurately collected. That being said, QA then plays a major role for us in our marketing organization as we move more to a data-driven strategies to effectively target and capture our audience. And so with that, our objective then becomes managing this customer data, right? So when we're looking at the overall MarTech landscape, the common problem that we see today is navigating customer data within a fragmented technology environment. There are certain things that we need to know about our audience, right? Who are our customers? What actions are they taking? And where are those actions taking place? Our initiatives at AvePoint are then to develop a data model that supports the customer journey. And in order to do so, we first have to build a solid data foundation, which relies on clean data. Therefore, QA tools like Moxie become critical to this initiative to be successful, right? I'm going to pause on that point real quick, just because I think it's a very important one. For a long time at AvePoint, we've been doing manual testing, right? And what we found is that, great, we do find a lot of errors and whatnot, but we can't really scale that. We don't have the manpower and resources to go ahead and just manually test everything. And so when one of my colleagues, brought Moxie at that time with Thomas on to my desk, to me, it was just like a bright light bulb just went off. And it was just yes, this is exactly what we need. Something that can automate a lot of the testings that we do and do it at scale, right? And run multiple different types of tests. And I'll go further into those, but I do want to make that point at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah, let me ask you that, by the way. So when we were chatting, you had said, hey, I actually was going to, you're technically proficient. And you were like, hey, I was actually going to think about building sort of a testing solution or scripts myself. How was that decision process? Walk me through what you were thinking about that, because I think a lot of people are want to build that, right? When Mary Heather Lyons, our CEO, and I were at Microsoft, we wanted to go build it, right? Microsoft would have given us money to go build it. And it was oh, we have our day job that we're already working a ton on, and we can't go build this, and we got to steal an engineer, which isn't going to really happen. But even at in Microsoft, we had all the budget and we couldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very good question, right? It's the classical build versus buy debate. And I've actually been having this debate a lot internally. For me, At the beginning, yes. I did want to build it mainly because, you know, I did so much of the testing manually that I knew what I wanted to find. The issue there became what you said, like we need, you know, my time, I need to borrow engineers' time and all of that. And so when you take a step back and, you know, look at the bigger picture of things, is that really feasible, right? Can we spare some of the devs from the team to go ahead and just start working on building this application for us to start using for testing? And then the biggest aspect of a build versus buy debate, a lot of people kind of just gloss over this part, is the maintenance aspect of it, right? You're gonna have to update it. You're gonna have to make sure all API connections are always working on time, or, you know, they're pulling the data accurately, they're working correctly, and all of that stuff. And if there happens to be a problem, that problem becomes yours to solve. And so, again, looking into that, you know, I had a couple of like tools in mind for like robotic process automation items and stuff like that. But when my colleague mentioned Stack Moxie, and I took a look into it, and, you know, I found that it really goes deep into, you know, like for example, we use Dynamics as our CRM, and we have Marketo as our marketing automation platform. Stack Moxie is able to go in and actually perform all of the tests that I have done manually in the past when I was testing. And it does that within Marketo, does that within CRM. They also have other integrations for other platforms that you're using. So, you know, I sat there and looked at it, and the time to implementation and everything was very short when it came to like purchasing Stack Moxie. So those kind of like went into the decision factor as to like why, you know, we decided to go with Stack Moxie as opposed to build something that probably would have taken a lot longer, had a lot more issues before it became even good enough for a beta version of it, let alone a full out version. And so while, you know, we're moving very fast in our go-to-market strategies, I needed something just as fast to like go ahead and get built into our MarTech stack so that we could go ahead and progress on our go-to-market strategies. One of the first key things that we did, that I did at AvePoint prior to taking the role as a marketing technology director, was I performed a MarTech Gap Analysis. And from our gap analysis, we identified two key issues, and, you know, that's siloed data and attribution not being set up correctly. And for us to achieve our objective of customer data management, we need to have a solid data foundation that's collected and processed in a centralized location. We know from this tech gap analysis, we were not able to do that from our siloed data. In the past, we've typically used Band-Aid solutions like adding middleware or point solutions. And that, you know, that resulted in what we call a runaway stack complexity, right? You typically see stacks with 50+ tools for many solutions, essentially becoming a nightmare to manage. We also saw large volumes of unusable siloed data. For example, different sets of contact information for the same people, right? So you have like myself having a couple of records in CRM, a couple of records in Marketo, and a couple of records in, you know, another platform. And again, that becomes a nightmare, right? Which are you targeting, the right record of mine, or, you know, which one shows up in a query that you're putting in order to send out an email blast, for example. And so another question that also came up is then, you know, with all these siloed platform systems and tools, who owns the data, right? For example, in CRM, is it marketing or is it sales? Who owns that data? So in order for us to go ahead and build this data model that supports the customer journey, we know that our attribution setup will have to be done correctly. And our gap analysis has shown that there's definitely some holes, especially with certain platforms, for example, like LinkedIn. And, you know, LinkedIn not always passing accurate values to Marketo and etc. I mean, we'll go further into the LinkedIn part, but they don't really play friendly with too many other platforms. And so again, this was another key, you know, light bulb moment where I was like, all right, Stack Moxie can go ahead and help us, you know, routinely monitor these values, but not just monitor, but also test to see where the bad data is coming from. And so one of the key outcomes of that gap analysis is we need to come up with a framework that actually solves for our problems, right? So going away from that point solutions, adding middleware to like solve one issue. We need a full framework that solves all issues. So in a nutshell, right, you can summarize all three of the goals that you see on the slide for our data collection, data integrity and quality, and data activation by just one sentence. And that would be, we want to be able to have a data hub that can centralize data from multiple sources, clean it, and unify it. That will then give us the ability to segment that data and turn it around and send it back to our multiple marketing platforms for activation purposes. Data integrity and quality is essentially the key aspect of this slide, right? This not only enhances our marketing capabilities in order to pull new prospects or leads, but also improves our current customer experience by better serving the needs of our current customers. Therefore, then customer experience becomes the end goal of this framework. By following these three objectives of data collection, data integrity, and data activation, we're making it easier to get what the lead and prospects need in order to make a decision about our products. And we're also able to then target accurately, and we can better serve our customers and our prospects as well by doing that key segment. I'm going to pause here, see if you have any questions before I move on to the next slide.
Yeah, so just, I don't want to get like too much in the weeds. So are you guys pushing this to like a data warehouse or a CDP? Like, so somebody comes in from your website, goes to Marketo, are you then replicating that in a data warehouse or a CDP and then pushing it back to, data augmentation tools and then over to your CRM?
That is a perfect question. Yes, actually, we're doing all of that. So we are pushing all of this data into a CDP. And from the CDP, we're pushing it into a data warehouse, right? So we'll have two records, both one in the warehouse and one in the CDP. And then from the CDP, we're also pushing that back to our marketing platform. So like, the data comes in from Marketo, we're going to be able to push it right back to Marketo after it's been cleaned, synthesized, and all of that. We're able to push back to Google Analytics, we're able to push back to Dynamics, and all of our different other marketing platforms.
And then my guess is you got a direct analytics team that's also, since you're a Microsoft shop, using Power BI to sort of use that as sort of everything across. Because I think like the CDP and data warehouse is like the most talked about thing in marketing operations right now.
Yeah.
And it has been for 3 years and might be for another half decade. So yeah, I just wanted to understand how that sort of stack looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And the CDP is critical to the stack, as it is the backbone of the entire marketing tech stack. And so for us, the reason we're pushing to a data warehouse is for our BI teams to go ahead and be able to then apply advanced analytics to that data, as well as apply machine learning to that data. And that will, again, help us serve our customers, give them a better experience on our website, and give them, exactly what they need, whatever that may be.
Ariel has a question. Go ahead.
Yes. So when performing a gap analysis, how did you determine what the key metrics were that you should focus on?
And that's a really good question, right? We took a step back, right? And we looked at our overall KPIs for the marketing organization in general, right? And we kind of assessed each and every one of those KPIs. So whether it be, convert leads, convert like CPAs, sessions on the website, bounce rates, a lot of those vanity metrics, we looked at those and we decided, okay, how are we collecting this data, right? What technology do we have in place that's giving us the ability to collect each and every one of these data points? And from that perspective, then it's working backwards, right? Like how is that data flowing through the entire tech stack? Looking for certain gaps or breaks where there could be potential data leaks. And that's essentially what, the gap analysis was looking for, those specific gaps. It's like, is, for example, looking at ROI as a KPI, right? How are we coming to that specific metric, right? Are we using an attribution method? Which attribution method are we using, whether it be a last touch, first touch, or whatnot? But going even further into that, how are we then building that model, right? Are we using UTM parameters and things of that nature? Sure, we're using UTM parameters. So going backwards is like, all right, where can UTM parameters break? right? And that becomes a key part, right? So for example, one of the gaps identified, LinkedIn, right? It doesn't always send the correct attribution value for the UTM parameter. So in that case, that affects the ROI for LinkedIn. One of the examples that we solved for was some leads were being inaccurately tagged in our Marketo system. So they were coming in from LinkedIn, but they didn't have the LinkedIn parameter on their UTM values. They had a completely different one. And so we were attributing them to something else. And meanwhile, our CPA in LinkedIn looks huge, right? And we're not really showing a good return for it because we are, again, inaccurately labeling these leads coming in as something else other than LinkedIn. And so solving for those gaps is essentially, the whole idea behind the MarTech Gap Analysis.
Thank you. That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, in DevOps, there's this idea and concept called observability, and it's one of those things of like, we're just going to assume that everything's broken and is broken as its sort of natural state, and that it's not all working correctly. And you're going to say, well, duh, Neil, that makes sense. But I think as we also talk to like sort of higher ups or other people within the organization, like they forget about that. They're like, oh yeah, like, we can joke that our MarTech stack is glued together with baling wire and duct tape, but then like, what does that actually mean for people that are sort of watching through and doing the gap analysis of like, where are things breaking, and just sort of assuming the mindset of we need to make sure we assume that it's sort of broken and then come back. So I think that was a good answer.
Yeah, and we're definitely trying to do more of that. At that point, we're taking we're just observing how the data is actually flowing right now, right? Because what we found is, when we assume that it's working correctly, we're obviously biased, right? We want it to be working correctly, but so then it's harder to find those specific gaps at that point. And so right now we're taking a step back and we're like, okay, well, let's just look at the actual flow, observe it, and see, how it's actually moving versus like what we think it's doing. And that's helped us out tremendously. And when we do find these gaps and a lot of these different findings, it actually helps set up our testing in Stack Moxie, right? Because now I know what errors I should be looking for, right? And then I can also set up broad tests in Stack Moxie where I'm like, okay, maybe I don't know a specific error, but I do know there is something wrong over there. And so let me just go ahead and set up a test that pulls in all the different values, again, without going over our limits. But, and that also gives me an idea of like, okay, well, I knew there was an error here, but wow, there's a different error here. So we also have to address that issue as well. Cool. And then just giving you guys like a brief overview of our tech stack. I mean, this is a part of it. It's definitely not all of it. But these are some of the major players in there, right? So Stack Moxie, again, is central to making sure that we find a lot of the errors and that we fix them. The fix them part is going to be critical, and that's the people part later. Dynamics is our CRM of choice, and then Marketo is our marketing automation platform. Asana, we'll get into in a little bit, is a privacy tool, a very stringent privacy tool. And it has caused some issues in data collection, but again, we're able to identify some of those issues with Stack Moxie and then find creative ways around those. Segment, as mentioned before, is our CDP, and that's critical to the entire framework. Segment does a lot, and we will be using it, the full power of it. And then LinkedIn is key to our lead prospecting strategies as well. And so just a quick goal, one of my big goals when building this MarTech stack is essentially, I wanted to build a technology stack to support the overall business objectives and goals, but also enabling marketing teams to get higher quality leads by modeling behaviors and patterns and understanding what customers are actually doing within their journey, right? And providing what they need at the right moment. I think that's critical. It's just again, the whole observability aspect of it is looking at the customer journey by how it's actually happening versus going in with a bias thinking, okay, someone comes to the site, downloads the ebook, is excited about the ebook, salesperson contacts them, they buy one of our SaaS solutions. That's an assumption, and it doesn't always go down that way. So the observability aspect of it is big for us. And then the other thing regarding our tech stack is the execution of the tech stack, right? The trick is to doing this effectively. Is to build a platform-based infrastructure, build it on a solid data foundation, and one that eliminates silos. As you know, that was a big part of our gap. Streamlines our data integration and finds solutions to our existing and future business goals. So that is basically what I have been tasked with and solving. And so we'll walk through a few of those points. And so that comes out to our objectives, right? We want to centralize our systems. We want to essentially find all the stuff that's falling through the cracks, fix broken attribution, and yeah, essentially go through a digital transformation. But one of the things that I wanted to note over here on this slide is that these objectives help us achieve three main themes from our marketing mandate. That's going to be performance, impact, and loyalty. And so for performance, we're focused on optimizing marketing campaign performance across every campaign, channel, audience segment, product line, and market. When we're looking at impact, we're looking at connecting marketing performance with sales and revenue across new and existing customers. The existing customers also being very key. And loyalty, improving that customer experience across the entire customer journey. And we want to, increase retention at that point. So when you take a step back, right, and you look at those three themes that I talked about, one thing that plays a key role in all of those is QA. And one of the principles of just technology in general is that to grow exponentially, we must create value by leveraging technology in at least one key building block. In this case, that's going to be insights, analysis, and data, right? We can then use technology that can help us analyze and automate routine activities to disrupt traditional operations. And that's kind of how I look at Stack Moxie in this instance. Is we're essentially using that to automate routine activities such as like checking to see if forms are broken, or finding those cracks and all the data that's falling through those cracks. And so that comes to the framework that we set out to build, right? So we're going from gaps to solutions. We're no longer looking at like 1-point solutions or middleware to like go ahead and build a Franken text stacker or whatever it's called. But we're focused on building essentially an ecosystem, right? And we're using a methodical approach to building that framework. So we're looking at it as a solution-based approach to MarTech management. And in order to start laying the foundation for our data collection, cleansing, and activation process, we first needed to make sure that the data we're collecting is clean and accurate. Again, that's where the QA plays a huge role. In order to do that efficiently, we need that QA to be automated, and we need different ways of testing, right? So it's not just like we're looking for one way of testing things. We'll go into the different testing methodologies in a little bit, but again, the idea being, we want to make sure nothing is falling through the cracks, right? We want to implement automation and processes to keep data clean at the source. And so here, we're connecting customer data from every first-party touch point, ensuring that the data is consistent and accurate, unifying that user history data, right? And that's what Neil was alluding to earlier, that CDP aspect of being able to get that full view of your user's history. Again, that full view of your user's history is meaningless if it's filled with bad data, right? So you can see why before we put a framework like this into place, we also have to like identify all root causes of our bad data in our tech stack.
And then
go ahead.
Quick question here. So like, because I'm looking at this, it's like connect customer data from first party touch point. And so the one thing we also didn't touch on in the tech stack, are you guys using anything like behavioral within the application? So like a mix panel or an amplitude, and bringing that sort of cohort analysis back into your marketing stuff?
That is a very great question. I'll tell you why it's a really good question. So we're currently in the process of looking at different platforms that could do that for us. We're looking at Amplitude and Pendo and some other platforms. However, we do have what we call telemetry data for our products themselves. And this goes back to like, we decided to build this feature and then quickly realized we can't really scale that feature. So we are going to be moving towards building a platform that could actually help us do that, with little to no code so that we can get it into the products as quick as possible. And so again, quickly touching on that unified user history, right? The reason why I want to keep drilling this point in is we come to the point where our goal becomes let's centralize all data points in order to achieve a unified record of our user or customer's history, right? A big theme right now in MarTech is the concept of the golden record. Everyone's looking to achieve the full 360 view of their customers, and they're taking different approaches of doing so. But mainly what you'll hear over and over and over again are the three letters, CDP. Neil had mentioned that earlier. And along with CDP come other topics such as identity resolution, activation, orchestration, and things of that nature. What most people don't go into great length when discussing these topics is that you want to build these records with accurate data, kind of like I just mentioned, right? If I have, for example, a golden record of myself coming in from all these different platforms, if the data from any of these different platforms is not accurate, it's not labeled correctly, it's dirty, or the schema doesn't match one of another platform's records and stuff like that, that then becomes, like a really big issue for the BI team, and not just the BI team, right? For the marketing team in general, because they're relying on these golden records to go ahead and build out their segmentations, their advanced segmentations, and so on. So before we even get to this step, we really had to make sure our data was clean, all the sources that we're gathering data from. So for example, in this diagram, if you look at the dynamics here, we had to make sure that that's clean. The Marketo data has to be clean. And that in and of itself took months to go through the Marketo data and just kind of scrub it. And so again, we're using Stack Moxie to essentially check out the integrations between Marketo, Dynamics, CRM, the web, and all of that. So I'm just going to keep moving. And so I definitely wanted to throw this in there. I was at Inbound in 2018. That's a conference hosted by HubSpot. And this is when they first introduced the flywheel concept to the marketing world, and everyone is basically mind blown. One thing that caught my mind, as Dharmesh and Brian, the co-founders of HubSpot, were describing their flywheel, was the concept of friction, right? Reducing friction was the key to making that flywheel successful. And you just pause over there. He had an entire formula for the friction and everything, but we're not going to get into like mathematics and all that here. What I want you all to take away from that is, to me, friction is essentially user experience. And the reason that caught on to me was, he then said the quote that you see on your screen is, you don't need to make your product 10 times better, you need to make your experience 10 times lighter. And improving that experience by 10 times is much easier than improving your product by 10 times, right? You're not going to go out there and hire hundreds of more engineers to work on your product, right? It's just a lot easier to get the marketing team and actually start collecting clean data and figure out how you can make that user experience a lot lighter. That's the easier road to take. And so, like as mentioned at the beginning of our session, is, to me, customer experience is integral to the overall MarTech stack, right? Because, going out there and getting new prospects and new leads is a big aspect of it. Retention to me plays a key part. And I think that also goes back to a business objective as well that we're trying to satisfy. And so with that being said, that was mostly the MarTech focus of our session. So now I'm going to go more into the weeds of some of the testings that we do, right? And before we get into that part, just wanted to give you guys a quick break with this quote. In the beginning of my career, a colleague has said that that has said the statement to me, and it essentially has stuck with me ever since then. Any tool or system is only as good as the data that you input into it. And for years and years and years, it's just been ingrained into my head. And I've seen it's become very clear as, prior to AvePoint, I was a lead MarTech consultant at a marketing and digital communications agency, and working with all sorts of clients, right? Small to mid-sized to Fortune 500s. One of the things I see is, people spending millions on like these big flashy products and platforms or whatnot. And you get there, you get in as a consultant, and you're sitting there, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but can I see the input of the data that's going into this process? Because you might have the best of the best breed technology, but at the end of the day, if you're putting like bad data into it, it's really, you might as well have bought the cheapest thing on the platform, because they're both about to give you the same output. And so, I see this more and more now as Scott has said, the big ops data is becoming everything, right? For DevOps and marketing ops in general. And so to me, that has switched my perception into like how I want to shape where our MarTech department is going. And I want to put more of a focus on that quality aspect of the data, as opposed to like, let me go out and buy all the best platforms out there to like make this MarTech stack look shiny. Because to me, the end goal is, again, customer experience and just having good data for our BI teams to go ahead and analyze and also visualize to our C-level and our key stakeholders. So with that being said, we're going to go straight into like our testing process, right? So again, when I started at AvePoint, we're doing a lot of things manually. We're filling, and what that entailed was filling out each form manually. Basically, not just forms, right? All user actions on the website, doing all of it manually, and kind of seeing how that data trickles down through the entire tech stack. And so, if I was to go to one of our websites, I'm looking at all of the different events that we're capturing, from whether they be click events or any other events, listeners and whatnot, filling out forms and seeing what happens to that data when I fill out a form, right? So it goes to our Marketo platform. Did it capture my ETM parameters when I filled it out? Are all fields sending to Marketo accurately and whatnot? And is my lead record, is it duplicated, or is it like, what's going on there, right? And then also seeing, well, so that's happened, it's in our marketing automation platform, it should also be in our CRM. Did that record also get synced to the CRM? Did all the same fields get synced over accurately? Is there any issues with our field mapping and stuff like that? And so you can see the process is very long and drawn out. Part of that process is going through multiple CSVs, Excel files, and whatnot. If you love Excel, which I do, this is a great way to spend days in Excel. But one of the things I found, especially as I moved up to more of a director level position, is I don't have the time for this, right? On average, I was spending about 10 hours per issue. And issues came up left and right. And so, one of the things I was explaining to, not just the Stack Moxie team, but also to like part of our C-suite was, I'm tasked with building out an entire infrastructure. I can't spend 10 hours plus a day on an issue, one small issue that, is very like direct. And like, for example, if a field marketer finds something that's wrong with some of the integrations and the data is not passing through accurately, and I'm in there for 10 hours, that's 10 hours I took away from building the entire infrastructure, which from my scope should be my my main focus, and having like someone else or another tool or something find and help alleviate these issues. So we look at it from a scalability perspective, right? You can't scale manual testing. We just don't have enough resources for that. We're not going to go out and essentially hire, like hundreds of people that will just do a lot of this user manual testing and whatnot. And we also identified earlier on in the session that we need multiple types of tests, right, to achieve our overall MarTech objectives. So it's not, like I said, it's not just going to be filling out forms, right? We need to test: is the website up? Is our emails and are the footers in our emails broken? Or our links and things not working within an email or on the website or other things. So there's multiple tests that need to be run simultaneously. Some of them have to be done in real time, and some of them, we can do ad hoc. But that requires some sort of automation with people. Again, the people part being critical. And then, yeah, that speaks to the last point, is we do need the ability to automate these tests.
I also feel that like it's always funny that testing goes back to being, in an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, and there's like hundreds of on each one, and then there's like on the bottom you see like 30, 40 different tabs, and then the person has to go and like check the box and then come back. And then to your comment about the footer, like two things always seem to happen is like someone would somehow screw up a footer, which it sounds like, oh, well, how do you screw up a footer? But everybody that's ever tested or sent an email knows that gets broken all the time. And then second, my deathly, like the one thing that would sort of keep me up at night was that like we would send out like a Japanese email to like a French customer, and like mixing those segments up on accident. That always kept me up at night, because we did it once on a test, and that always freaks me out that we're sending the wrong language to the wrong segment. Like not even worried about GDPR rules, just straight from the customer experience point of view. That is a horrible way to send an email.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, me and my bosses, every time we get like emails that are, that are sent in error, we will just go ahead and forward it to each other. Just like, hey guys, it's not just us that make mistakes. So it's kind of one of those, we're trying to avoid making those mistakes. And again, that's why we want a lot of these testings in place. But yeah, they do happen. And that goes to like all the different testing capabilities that Stack Moxie gives us, right? So we were looking at smoke testing. Our integrations, are they up and running? Real-time monitoring, which I've talked to a lot about, and we do use a lot from Stack Moxie, is do the leads perform as expected, right? And we need to monitor this routinely, just to make sure that not only are things falling through the cracks, but are they coming in as the way that we expected them to come in? Campaign testing is something we're starting to do more of. Now we're testing specific campaigns before we go live, and then after we go live too, right? Like everything might be perfect, and then as soon as the developer hits the push button to the production from staging, some things happen in that process. So we have to test after things go live as well. And some of the key things, I'm not going to walk through all of these, but some of the key things that we're working on right now is regression analysis. One of the things that we've noticed that we tend to find and fix a lot of issues, but then they tend to regress. And that has very insightful outcomes from that, because it's not always a tech issue, right? It could also be a people issue and a process issue. And so that, then I take a step back as I'm, again, reworking the entire MarTech department. Is I look into it and it's like, okay, well, the tech issues we've solved, but then the regression analysis shows us that there are process issues. And so now I have to go in and rewrite a lot of the different processes and just make sure that those are done accurately, so that we don't regress on the website or in an app or something like that. And then black box testing, know what you don't know. That's the fun part. So, here on the right-hand side, you'll see that's kind of like one of our, and I'll give you guys a better screenshot on the next couple of slides, but this is one of our real-time monitoring tests that we have up, and we're looking to see all the UTM tags that are coming in from our Google pay-per-click. The reason we're looking at all of them again, right, it goes back to that observability aspect that Neil brought up earlier, is one, we kind of want to see if everything is, if it's coming in accurately. Pat yourselves on the back end, we're doing a good job, but that's always not the case, right? And so it kind of helps us analyze which campaigns are, where the bad ETMs are coming from. Is it a specific region? Do we then need to go out to that region, talk to those field marketers and kind of see like what their process is, right? Maybe it's just as simple as they didn't understand that you needed to put UTM parameters on the links and stuff like that. Or maybe it's an actual thing where they don't know how to do it in Marketo and stuff like that. So that's kind of like how we're identifying a lot of like the leaks of the data sources, is using the real-time monitoring.
So this is awesome. Thank you. I love the screenshot. But like when I'm thinking about, oh, I should go do testing, it feels a lot like, you know, I should also go to the gym every day, but at 5 o'clock, or I don't end at 5 o'clock, but at 6:30, when I eventually just sort of stop, I'm like, now I got to go do dinner. I got to do all these other things. So like, how do you think about, like, we do some testing a day, of course, it's all manual, but then like, how do you think about implementing this, and where do you start? Because like, you're a busy guy, as you said, like, how do you start from where do you pick a starting point, and how do you implement?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I don't think there's one certain approach to it, right? I think you know, at first, yeah, it will begin with me and kind of just like setting out some of these broader, bigger tests, and you know, finding those gaps and issues and trying to get those fixed. But at the end of the day, you know, when we want to scale it and build that for the full department, the way I want to go about it is, you know, I don't want to put it all just on MarTech, right? So I want everyone to kind of share that responsibility. And so while, yes, we are going to be building a QA team within the MarTech department, for example, the dev team also needs to have their own QA team, right? That goes back to the example of like the regression issue that I spoke about. So in our department in MarTech, we will do a QA of the website from an SEO perspective. And we'll find all these issues and we send it over to the dev team to fix. They fix it, but then they don't QA it on their end. So then, you know, the next time we do an SEO tech audit, we will find those same issues because they've regressed, right? They might have fixed the issue at that time, but they didn't fix the root cause of that issue. And so you kind of see that back and forth, and it's like, all right, well, we will be like, you know, we'll have the main QA team in MarTech, but the dev team also needs to be doing, you know, all their different testings, whether there's branching testing or any one of those different tests between different stage environments and whatnot. And so the same applies to the rest of the marketing organization, right? Again, we will be responsible for the main QA of like our website and other products and stuff like that. But, you know, I'm relying on the analytics team to be like, hey, this data that's coming in is not accurate. It just doesn't make sense. I ran certain different types of analysis on it, and these are the graphs that I'm getting. Take a looking at those graphs, like, okay, yeah, that makes no sense. So your data is bad. So let's go ahead, either run some smoke testing over there, or do some RTM, and again, take that observability approach for that. And so that's how we're going to build it, with MarTech kind of being the central aspect of it, and then relying on other departments to then feed into that, that central QA team. So quickly speaking to attribution, right? And this goes back to that example I just gave from the BI team, but you know, attribution is is the backbone of our business intelligence and our ROI analysis, right? You know, all the examples of use, you saw that we use that Moxie to make sure that we're essentially collecting the correct UTM variables and passing them through the different platforms. One of the things that we found was that LinkedIn typically doesn't play friendly with their APIs, is not friendly. And we found leads not being correctly attributed to LinkedIn. And we also found leads being passed through without emails. One of the key insights that I actually found from the leads not being correctly attributed to LinkedIn wasn't an actual LinkedIn problem, which I was hoping it was, but it wasn't. It was actually the campaigns were being set up incorrectly in Marketo. And again, that goes into that, you know, this then becomes a process problem. And so we will then need to address that process with that team and see why they're having issues setting those campaigns up correctly in Marketo. And, you know, that's huge for our ROI analysis because at that point, when we do those different types of analyses, that's how we actually distribute our budgets to the different channels that we advertise in. And so if we're not attributing correctly to LinkedIn, we're taking money away from LinkedIn. And, you know, in that case, that's incorrect because a lot of these leads were for LinkedIn, but, you know, they're just not being tagged correctly. And so, you know, again, key points here is just identify whether the issue is part of the LinkedIn platform or Marketo, and then continuously monitor those leads in real time. So here's another example of that. And so this is kind of like the one I really wanted you all to see is, this is our test that we have set up in Stack Moxie. It's a real-time monitoring test. And what it does is it looks at what happens when a lead comes in from LinkedIn and then is then synced to Marketo, and from Marketo is synced over to Dynamics. In this test, we're testing whether the email for that lead is there, the country field is filled out correctly, because that's how we route our different leads from a sales perspective. But then again, speaking specifically to that ROI piece, the UTM parameters are key here. And again, if those are done incorrectly, then that really affects our budgeting. It affects a whole lot of strategic planning. And that goes up to like the higher ups. And so, tests like this one specifically have helped us significantly find a lot of like the issues and errors that we're seeing between those platforms. And again, we're working on fixing a lot of them, and we leave these up and running routinely just to be able to catch things that are wrong, but also catch things that are right as well. Any questions on this? Or?
No, like my one question would be, how long did it take you to sort of set this up?
So setting up the test is actually easy. It doesn't really take that much time, but it's actually thinking through what you need to be, like all the different things that you need to check, right? And that, for me, that came from the manual testing that we did. So it was easy to take the learnings from that and then apply it over to Stack Moxie, because the tool then just makes it easy for you to, for example, check the email field on this specific lead. And then you can switch between the different platforms and check emails there and check the different values there. So the actual setup of the test within Stack Moxie is not hard. It's the planning of the test that you need to actually spend some time on.
Yeah, another thing that also shows, it looks like it took about 40 minutes for this to run through.
Right.
It's funny because everybody always thinks that they've got 2 minutes to go from their LinkedIn to their Marketo to their Dynamics. And I think that it's obvious that it's not like 2 minutes, it's much longer than that. So it's much performance on this as well.
Absolutely. And then speaking to, go ahead.
I have a question. For implementing this, did you find that it was easy to get adoption from leadership and the rest of your team to buy into the idea of QA and testing automation?
Yes, especially when we pointed out to them, how it affects ROI and things of that nature. Absolutely. But, even moving past ROI and whatnot, when you're making those key business decisions on that strategic level, and you're doing it with data that's not accurate, then your results tend to be poor. And that's just the very quick, easy pitch to them. And then just kind of actually walking them through why that's the case, right? Like showing them that LinkedIn failed, where the person is attributed as coming from a Marketo email, when in fact the person came from LinkedIn. And what that does from a strategic level, if I'm pulling money away from LinkedIn and putting it into the marketing channels, but that marketing channel is not bringing in the new leads that we need, then that affects, like how the sales team operates and revenue in general. And they see the big picture over there when that happens. And then looking at, we alluded to some of the GDPR issues that we're having. So when we installed Asana, and Asana is a really great privacy tool, but it's a very stringent one, right? So we want to be in compliance with all the laws, and so we decided, let's go ahead and get this platform. It essentially does the job for you, and it takes away that whole privacy, that whole privacy nag, which is a big issue right now in MarTech. And so we're like, all right, fine, let's install it and let them deal with it. But then we also identified that we were losing data. And so, using Stack Moxie, we were able to identify where we were losing the most data, right? in this case, we were looking at which countries that we were losing data from and which campaigns. And I mean, it's not surprising that we found that a lot of the data was being lost among the European countries because, again, they take privacy much more seriously over there. And we also looked into like why we were losing the data, right? The technical aspects. So one of the first things that we did, we set out to test like our hypothesis. Is this new tool actually causing us to lose data, right? We used Moxie to run some real-time monitoring tests as well as some ad hoc tests. And we did find that, yes, the tool was causing some data issues and that we couldn't see certain parameters from some of our key platforms. And so, what we did is we evaluated our privacy settings for those specific countries, again, in accordance with those laws. And we adjusted the settings in the tool in a creative way to build trust with the users, right? So that looked at, looking at it from a user experience and a customer experience perspective, it's like, maybe they're just not seeing the banner is too small, or the buttons, were not easy for them to like find and click accept or stuff like that. So we tested a bunch of those different ideas. And essentially, when we did a lot of those testings, what we found was, and implemented them and made the banner more visible and things of that nature, is that, yes, some of these people are willing to give us the data. They just, at that point, were not able to see it, or just, it was hidden and stuff like that. So once, we got more people to accept and give us, some of their data, we were then able to then better hone in our marketing skills. And that's how we actually increase our conversions while regaining most of our data from those regions. And then, to end on this note, right? Again, I've been tasked with scaling the MarTech team and the systems at AvePoint. And so for me, one of the biggest things, when I set out to do that was, let me come up with 3 main pillars of growth, right? And to me, those 3 pillars are integrations, QA, and innovation. I mean, they're very straightforward. I chose them for that reason, right? Like I wanted this to be as simple as possible so that there is no confusion as to like what the purpose of the department is. However, the idea is to automate and centralize as much in pillars 1 and 2. So, the integrations, automate as much and centralize as much of that as possible. Same thing with QA. And again, Moxie's helped with the automation of our testing and our QA processes. When you automate as much as you can in 1 and 2, what that then does is it frees up the time, frees up people's time for pillar 3, which is innovation. And innovation can be anything from, being proactive, right? Like going out there and finding new ways to do new things, as opposed to being reactive, which in that case, what I found, especially from our gap analysis, we tend to be reactive, right? We find an issue, we fix it. Then we look for the next issue, then we fix it, right? The idea is to put that in the past and move to stop looking for issues and start looking for new ways to do things, right? Solutions. And that's a big goal of mine, right? And so what I want to do is, build out a data-driven environment in which processes and QA are automated as much as possible. Therefore, then we can give the team members in MarTech more time to be innovative while we're focusing on, again, customer experience and overall business objectives and goals. And so, the big takeaway here is we're doing all of this with a focus on customer experience, right? A lot of what I talked about today is, data and making sure it's accurate and whatnot. And while I focus on data, I'd also like to point out that, again, technology and data won't solve all problems. In my experience, especially working with other organizations, the key focus is people, right? Whether it be internally, like employees and whatnot, or externally, like your customers. And that's where the value comes from. So, we're taking a focus on people approach, then process, data, and technology in that order. And then end it with this quote, right? I was watching The Social Dilemma, and Edward Tufte has said, there are only 2 industries that call their customers users, right? The illegal drug industry and the software industry. And so our goal is to regard them as people. And when he said that, to me, kind of like I wrapped it back around is to we need to focus on, our customers as people, right? So that goes into like a whole empathetic marketing. But when you look at it overall, you're looking at data, it's no longer business centric, rather it becomes customer centric as a result of moving all of that customer data to the center of the organization.
Yeah, it's amazing as like, it's hard when we hear like digital transformation, like that's been a buzzword for over a decade. And then, Microsoft made it worse when Satya said, hey, we saw more digital transformation in 30 days than we did in 10 years. But it's like, what does sort of data mean? And like, you always just see these, it's like very buzzy words. And it's like, well, we should be thinking about it in terms of the customer. You're 100% right. And it's like small chunkable things like UTM codes not being attached and attributed correctly, and then thinking about how it moves through the data warehouse onto the CRM so that we can report off of it, like getting more granular. It was great to see you kind of get granular on that.
Awesome. Yeah. If anyone has any questions, feel free, or I will at some point in the chat give out my email and stuff. So if you guys want to discuss any of this further, I'm more than willing to. I can speak about this for days.
Well, no, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time. And we're gonna have you back in a year to see how the organization's built out and like what sort of innovations you've done. Because I always think like innovation is also a buzzword. It's like, we joke that there's never a silver bullet, there's 1,000 lead bullets, right? Like you're always just constantly optimizing and constantly iterating. And that's what really creates innovation, not just like the 3 o'clock in the morning aha moment. So I'm excited to have you back in a year to figure out what sort of innovations you guys have come up with.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dawit, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone in the audience, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. If you would like to have a free instance of Stack Moxie, you can go to stackmoxie.com. We have a always free instance that you can try, and so you can start working around with it. Ariel Sasso is our head of customer success, and is always happy to walk you through what we're doing and how to make your team have QA as well. Thank you.
Thank you.